to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
You know, before we got started today, we were talking about pets because Joy has been unusually demanding of attention. And so I'm hoping he's going to let me go here for the podcast. He's turned his back on me. That's usually a good sign. But we'll just have, so if you hear like a crash or something, that's just him knocking the microphone over, which listeners know he does fairly frequently. So we'll just kind of go with that. But in the meantime, I'm going to be having a conversation with my newest friend, Dr. Mark A. Hicks, who is joining me today to talk about learning love. And Mark, when you when I read your bio on Podmatch, one of the things that jumped out to me was something. It's a phrase that has actually it's become so ubiquitous, so commonplace that it almost doesn't have meaning anymore. But it does have meaning. That's toxic relationships or toxicity in relationships. It's gotten to the point now where just about anything that you disagree with, that's toxicity. But there's actually a much more formal approach to what toxicity is. So I want to just, first of all, welcome you to the program. Thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
And let's just kind of like lay the groundwork here. When we're talking about toxicity, what are we talking about?
You're exactly right. It's tough to define because there are always going to be annoyances. There's always going to be stuff that happens in relationships. I mean, that's just part of it. The problem is sometimes abusers will use that. They will say things like, well, you can't expect things to be perfect and you can't expect things to go well all the time. And it's very hard to draw that line sometimes of when is this an annoyance that we need to work through in a relationship, and when has this become toxic, abusive, where there needs to be some serious boundaries and maybe even in the relationship. And sometimes people are surprised to hear me say that because I'm a relationship coach. I believe in love. I teach love. And people think sometimes that every relationship can be saved. Theoretically, that's true. They can be if everyone is practicing the things that I teach in my book and other authors are teaching. People are out there teaching how to have healthy, happy relationships. Yes, theoretically, but the reality is not everyone's going to. There are some bad people in the world, unfortunately. And so it is tough to draw that line. I'll say a couple of things about that just to lay the groundwork. One, if you keep fighting over the same thing continually in a relationship, you never solve a problem. That's one really good sign that you're in a toxic relationship. Annoyances can be worked out. Difficulties will come along, but they can be resolved. And if you're resolving that difficulty, and then the next time you have a difficulty, it's a different situation, that's actually a pretty good sign that you're fixing a problem, you're dealing with it, you're moving on, and then something else comes up. That's okay. That's just life. But when you continually find yourself going back over the same stuff, feeling the same way over similar issues or the same issue, over and over again in a relationship, and nothing ever seems to get resolved, that's one really good and very common sign that you are in a toxic or abusive situation. The other thing I tell folks is don't try to make that decision by yourself. When you're in a difficult situation in a relationship, it's hard to draw those lines. It's hard to really get a good view of things. Secrets are deadly in relationships. Don't keep secrets if you think you are struggling maybe in an abusive or a toxic or dysfunctional relationship. Talk to people, and particularly talk to a professional. One of the things I'll harp on all the time, we go to doctors for our physical body. We go to dentists for our teeth. We go to a mechanic when our car is not running well. We hire plumbers. We hire lawyers. Why would we not look to a professional to help us with such an important question like, am I in a toxic relationship? There are counselors, therapists, relationship coaches out there that can help you specifically with your situation, dig into the details, and figure out, is this something that can be worked out, or is this something that has become truly toxic?
There are a few other aspects to the whole toxicity thing that I think are germane. I'm going to be curious to see what your take is. The first one being that to borrow from the old phrase, it takes two to tango. So part of the question that you have to kind of be willing to address is, okay, so where's the toxicity coming from?
That's absolutely true. Yeah, and even if you can look at your partner and legitimately say this is mostly their fault, this is 80% their fault, 90% their fault, and you are positive that that is true, that portion that is your fault is still important. Even if it's a small amount, even if you think it pales in comparison to what your partner is doing wrong, you still need to address what's going on with you, which just reinforces what I just said about getting a counselor, getting a coach that can help you gain some perspective of, do you need to take some responsibility, but don't blame yourself for what your partner is doing wrong. Don't take responsibility for other people's actions, but we do have to take responsibility for our own. And that's a good phrase. It takes two to tango. It takes two people to make a relationship work, and it takes two people very often that break down that relationship and for it to become toxic. So even if you think you have a fair case to blame your partner for a lot of it, still take a look at yourself and what you can do different. And you might be surprised if you start changing what you're doing, how that can sometimes have an effect. It's not foolproof, but it can have an effect on your relationship.
Another piece to it, in my mind, is you made reference to blame. I'll describe the same thing in terms of being right. I've noted that there are many relationships where both people involved are bound and determined to demonstrate that they're right. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. It doesn't matter how serious it gets.
Yeah,
I'm right. I'm the one who's right here. You're wrong. I'm right.
Yeah, there's a phrase, and I'm not sure who originally said it. It may have been Dr. Phil or some other TV guru. I'm not sure which one it was, but the phrase stuck with me, and it's, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship?
Yeah.
And so often we get caught up in, I want to be right, and I am right, and I'm gonna stand here and be right in my rightness and show you how right I am. Well, okay, you can do that and destroy your relationship in the process. And that's actually pretty common. We get so caught up in trying to win the argument that we lose the relationship. We may win that battle, but we lose something much more important in the process. It is important to stand up for certain things. It's important in certain areas that you don't just back down, that you do stand up for what's right. But those are pretty few and far between. There's very few things in life that are worth sacrificing an important relationship, whether it be a friendship or a spouse or family member. There are some, but be careful how many of those you pick, and not to continually go back. But that's another reason why we don't keep secrets, because sometimes these things get in our heads and they just become so important in our own minds. When we say that out loud to someone else that's not involved in the fight, maybe a friend, especially a counselor, it helps us get some perspective. When we say it out loud sometimes and get someone else's response that's not involved, we might see it's not really all that important. It's not as dramatic as we're making it out to be as we roll it around our head, especially at night when we get to thinking about it all over again and we start playing those tapes in our head. Most things really aren't that important. And so just be careful which hills you want to set as a battlefield.
Yeah. For myself, I came to the conclusion that I didn't want to be on a battlefield.
Yeah.
I mean, I found no value in it.
Yeah.
Not that I wasn't on the battlefield for a long time, because I certainly was on the battlefield for a long time. Not so much with my primary relationship, although it kind of sometimes would go there, but more often just in life, just with various relationships in life.
Yeah.
And boy, I mean, after a while, the thing that happens, I think, and I suspect that the experiences are different from one person to the next, but I think ultimately what happens is the longer that you stay in that place, the more alienated you become from society.
Yeah. Yeah. If you insist on having your own way, and it is just about you, and it is just about being right, you can win those battles sometimes, but you're going to live a very lonely life. You're going to be able to stand in your rightness alone eventually, because that's just not what a lot of people are looking for in a relationship. They're not looking to be beat up and shown how wrong they are on stuff that really doesn't matter. And so, yeah, like I said, it's not that I want to rule out all things, as we would never argue about something, never stand up, never be on the battlefield. There are certain things that maybe are that important, but there's not many. So be careful.
It's a pretty short list, I think.
It's a pretty short list. And again, check that list with somebody else, because we can really get into our own minds on things and blow it out of proportion. And someone else can kind of help us get some perspective on that. And it's good to hear a friend, a family member, a counselor that's not involved say, that's not all that important. Or what are you going to win? If your spouse, your family member comes around and says, okay, I get it. Finally, I get it. You're right. What if you won? What have you accomplished at that point, other than, wasting a lot of time, energy, and capital in that relationship and connection in that relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question, because once you can answer that question clearly and truthfully and in a forthright manner, what you're probably doing is you're probably fighting for something that really doesn't serve you.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can answer that question and there's a legitimate answer, and again, don't keep it a secret. Other people are saying, yeah, I see your point there. That's a legitimate thing you're going to win if you get this. Okay. But I doubt you're going to find too many things that really answer that question well.
And there's probably a price you're going to pay along the way anyway.
Yeah, it's a price you're going to pay. So yeah, those are the kind of questions that build relationships. And that's one of the things I emphasize, that relationships are built. It's a learned skill set. What we're talking about now is a lot of instinct. I'm right, and so I'm going to fight for what I know is right. That's instinctual, but that's not necessarily the best decision. Love is a skill set. Building relationships is a skill set, and it's not just about knee-jerk reactions and basic human instincts. It's about understanding the core components of what it takes to build a relationship and putting those into practice.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to decide that you came into this field, into this realm, through something in your own life experience, because that's the way these kinds of things typically play out, right?
That's exactly how it plays out. That's true of me as well. I really had what I say is a threefold path that brought me to writing my book, Learning Love. One is I am a counselor. I have a background in counseling, master's degree in mental health counseling. And in every area of counseling, we deal with relationships, whether it's a relationship with yourself, with other people, maybe at home, at work, wherever it is. It's all about relationships. I also come from a background of spirituality and theology. And in that realm, it's about relationships, relationship with ourselves, relationship with others, relationship with God. But the third path is that personal experience. I was raised in a healthy, happy household. I had a great childhood with loving parents. And so from that, I learned a lot about what love is, but I grew up with an assumption. Love just happens. It's just natural. It always came natural in my family, and my parents loved me from the start. I never knew a time that I wasn't loved by my family. And so I just assumed from that, life just kind of unfolds that way, and relationships are relationships. And sure, you have a little tension sometimes, but you work it out and everything's fine. From that assumption, I went very naively into adulthood and ended up in a toxic first marriage. It was an utter disaster. It was a very painful experience, and it ended in divorce. And from that, I began to ask these questions. What is love? Is it even really possible? Can you build a life of love? Is it just luck? Is it just some people happen to find that right person and some people don't? Is it possible to really understand what love is and how to practice it? And so I didn't fully understand all this at the time, but looking back, I could see there were really some seeds planted from that experience of that difficult relationship and divorce that really drove me to ask those powerful questions. And then as a counselor, as a theologian, those paths all converged into wanting to understand and eventually coming to a place that I could articulate what love is to its basic components and how to practice it. So in my book, I teach the 5 components of love. And if people learn and practice these 5 components, anybody can build healthy, happy, thriving relationships. Even if you've been through a divorce or come from a dysfunctional family or have been through relationship trauma of some kind or struggling in relationships now, relationships are a learned skill set, and it is possible to build those. And now I'm experiencing that. I'm remarried, very happily married. I often say I've had a bad marriage and a good marriage, and good is better. And so we really need to find ways of having that. And I think I'm able to articulate how to do that. Now, that's still a practice. Don't get me wrong. I'm still practicing every day. Love is not something that we emerge into and raise triumphant. It's a practice, and it's something that we continue to practice throughout our lives in all our relationships. But whether it's at home or at work or with friends, the basic 5 components of love are the same regardless of the relationship. Now, it manifests differently. A relationship with your spouse is obviously very different than with a coworker, but the 5 components of building healthy, happy relationships are the same throughout life.
Well, now that you've teed that up so nicely for me, I've got to take a swing at it. What are the 5 components of a successful, loving relationship?
I'm glad you asked. The first one comes as a surprise to many folks. The first component of love is grief. And that is because no one gets through life without scars. Life is going to be difficult. We can have a lot of fun along the way. We can have a great time, and there are a lot of blessings in life. But there's also difficulties, and there's also hardships, and people in our life pass away, and there are struggles. And if we're not careful, we can instinctively, because of the hurts of life, begin to put up barriers, put up emotional walls, keep people at arm's length, try to protect ourselves. That's a natural instinct, but it doesn't build relationships. It just keeps people pushed away. I worked with a lady one time when I was a counselor in a hospital program. She was, I think, 72 years old, and she had lived a life of bitterness and anger. She'd gotten married, she had kids, but she had a terrible relationship with all of them. She had always been defensive with everyone, had very few relationships as far as friendship or anything like that. And by the time she got into her 70s, the weight of depression and just the weight of that bitterness was weighing her down so much, she had finally sought treatment. Long story short, as we worked through that, the core of that bitterness and anger traced all the way back to a falling out she had with her sister 50 years prior. They had been best friends growing up. They had a huge falling out, never spoke again. Wow. And she had come to the conclusion, if my sister can betray me, I can't trust anyone. And so she never did ever again. And really that became the story of her life. Now we think, what would happen if she had been able to grieve the loss of her sister? If she had been able to grieve through that loss and allow that grief to be her comeback story. And that's what grief is. It's our comeback story, that we are able to grieve as a healer. It's not fun. Nobody wants to go through it, but grief is a healer. And so if we're able to heal from those wounds and we are able to stay connected, keep those barriers down, stay connected with people, keep our hearts and our minds open to relationships, even though we've been hurt, we can't fix the past, but we can go on to a good life anyway. I often say that sometimes things are so painful, it leaves a hole in our heart, but you can live a really good life with a hole in your heart. And if we understand that, we don't try to fix the past, but we try to live that good life anyway. This lady could have done that had she known that first component of love is grief. Sometimes we do get hurt, But if we grieve and we heal, that's our comeback story, and we're able to stay engaged in healthy relationships. And that's why that's the first component of love.
And I like that, not the least of which is it illustrates very nicely what happens when you don't let go of something.
Yeah. Yeah, if we aren't able to grieve, we just hold on to that hurt. And naturally, when we're feeling that, we're going to protect ourselves. Our brains have reactions naturally. We have a basic human instinct to protect ourselves from hurt. And if we don't think on a higher level and allow ourselves to grieve, if we just go with our gut instinct to protect ourselves, we'll keep people out. But when we learn how to grieve, we learn how to let go of the past and embrace relationships in the future despite the past, we can go on to healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is definitely what it's all about. Okay, so there's our first component. What's the second one?
The second component of love is emotion. That's the one everybody expects. That's the one we know. That's the beautiful side of love. That's the what everybody's looking for. That's what we make rom-com movies about. And for a lot of people, that comes natural. They express their emotions naturally. They love those connections with people. And folks that have that naturally, they don't need people like me teaching them how to do it. They know how to do it. But there are people that are more reserved, more cerebral. They're not so sure about showing their emotions. And for people like that, I say it's a learned skill, like any other. Start small. But the important thing is that people in your life who you care about need to know you care about them. Your family needs to know you care. They need to hear it. Don't make them assume it. Let them know you care. The people at work that you appreciate, let them know you appreciate them. That goes a long way to building relationships. Learn to express things. Learn to say, I love you. And if you just can't do that because maybe you were raised in an abusive household as a child and love was a word that was loaded and used as a weapon, then don't say that word. Let that go. Say things like, I appreciate you, or just thank you. The point is, do what you can to connect on an emotional level. For some, that comes easy. For others, it will take a little bit of practice, but that's okay. It's a practice like any other. Anything you do that you're not naturally good at, it will feel awkward at first. It'll be a little weird feeling at first, but you can get better at it. You weren't probably good at basketball the first time you picked one up either, but after a while, it comes pretty natural to folks if they practice. Eventually almost everybody can shoot a hoop every now and then, even if it doesn't come natural. Cooking, gardening, everything doesn't make a lot of sense when you first start. The same is true for emotions in relationships. If you're not naturally good at it, just practice. Just start small, but show that you care. Say the words out loud, and it'll take you a long way to connecting in those relationships.
In my own experience, because I was very, very reserved when I was young, incredibly, I was very, very introverted. And what I've learned over time was that the more that I took steps, because that's basically what you're talking about, taking steps. The more that I took steps, I began to find my earliest childhood training revealing itself in ways that it didn't reveal itself before. Yeah. In other words, the steps help you to connect to what was actually going on in ways that just sitting in a therapy chair and saying, well, what went on when you were 3 years old? That doesn't do it as well.
Yeah, and that's why practice is a word that I use a lot, because our brains just sort of begin to make connections. When we get involved in something and we start working at it, then our brain starts to do exactly what you said. It starts to make that connection and say, oh yeah, this makes sense now because of how I grew up. Now I'm kind of getting it. Our brains can make those connections, but we have to be in the game. We have to be in the process and in practice so that we can make those connections. It's not going to happen just kind of sitting back and hoping that things change someday. Start small. You don't have to push yourself, but just start small and let people know you care about them. Say the words that from your coworkers, to your family, to your spouse, to your friends. I appreciate you. you mean something to me, and I love you.
Mhm.
Whatever the relationship is, whatever is appropriate for the relationship, and whatever you can do at the time, say the words.
Yeah, I like that. I think also that the difficulty of expression it's an opportunity. The fact that it's difficult is an opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what the way is I want to express it, but I know that for myself, as time went on, as I began to understand more and more what had happened in my own life, well, tying back actually to what we talked about earlier, one of the best things that I learned how to do was to look at my own life, my own early training, so to speak, without trying to be right about it, without blaming, without trying to, find a way to be judgmental about it.
Right.
Leaving the judgment behind and just saying, well, that's what it was. That's all. It was nothing else other than that's what it was. And that's where it becomes easier, at least from my perspective and from my experience, that's where it becomes easier to be appreciative. Because, well, I don't have to agree with the way that I was raised, but I can at least appreciate. Now I understand what happened.
Yep.
Now I understand what was going on.
Yeah. The way I express that, you're getting to something I deal with a lot in my book. And the way I express that is give up the word should.
Yeah.
I actually learned that from Dr. David Burns.
Useless words in the English language.
It's the worst word in the English language. Dr. David Burns writes this in his book, Feeling Good, and another book he wrote called Feeling Great, both worth the time to read. But he talks a lot about that. Giving up the word should. Should is not going to help you. We deal with what is, and we can waste a lot of time and energy judging what should be rather than just dealing with what is. And of course, there's some shoulds that are obvious in the English language, like the sun should come up tomorrow. We get that. But if it's not one of those, natural laws, if it's not an obvious one, let it go. That's what is. You could say, obviously you might like it to be different, but it's not a should. There's no law of the universe that says things have to be a certain way. We may wish they'd have been some way or another, but that's different than putting that should on there, because that's a judgment, like you said, that just wastes a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of focus. Let go of should and just embrace. I shouldn't say just, because that implies that it's easy. It's not. but work to embrace the idea of what is, and work at and that will help you a lot with your emotional connections. When we kind of get past this, well, they should do this and they should do that, and I should feel this way. Now, just deal with what is.
On a sidetrack, I'll take this idea and I'll apply, give kind of like a pro tip to people who are trying to cut down on their social media usage or cut down on how much news they're paying to and so forth. If you see a headline that includes either the word should or could, skip it. It has absolutely no value at all. I don't care what it's about.
No, I mean, what you're talking about then, when somebody says should, you just reached their opinion.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You may agree with their opinion or not agree with their opinion, but
it's still not a helpful article, post, whatever. It's useless. It really is. It has
not
no
helpful.
real value.
You're exactly right, because there are no shoulds other than, like I said, sun should come up tomorrow. There's a few basic things, but people aren't going to write articles about that. When we use the word should in that context, it's just an opinion, and it's trying to get other people riled up into something, and it's not helpful.
And have you ever honestly seen any situation where the word should or could was used to rile you up about something that is good?
That's a good point. No, come to think of it, that is, because people, if we're trying to rile people up, things like anger and fear work really easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so we try to push those buttons, and people can do that in all kinds of relationships. They do that at work. We do it in our families. We push those buttons of anger and fear, and should is a way to do that. But it doesn't build healthy relationships. If we want to build healthy relationships, they're not built on anger and fear, and it's not based on judgment of should. It is based on those healthy connections of dealing with what is. And if something's not acceptable, then dealing with that reality, not dealing with a should, but how would we like things to be different and how can we get there?
I made a commitment to myself a few years ago. I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Exactly.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we got a few of the components. What's the next component on the list
The
here?
component number 3 is practicality. Now, for the folks that were struggling with the emotion, this is the one they've been waiting for. This is the cerebral side of love, and there is that. We have to have practical decision making and do the things well every day that build a good life together, whether it be at home or at work or any other place. I often say that emotion brings us together, practicality keeps us together. And in many ways, practicality is the forgotten element of love because they don't make rom-com movies about, practical guys that make good decisions. But it's those practical good decisions that keep us together. Things like, for instance, if you are a married couple, how are you going to deal with money? Money is a big issue within a marriage. I knew a couple one time, they were both extraordinarily attractive people, incredibly athletic, very active, and they were such nice people. And they had a good relationship, but he had a spending addiction and it eventually destroyed them. They eventually divorced because the trust was broken. He was hiding the addiction and things of that nature. And she said to me, and she's not the first one I've heard this from, but she said, "I love him, but I can't live with him."
Mm-hmm.
That is such a sad statement.
Yeah.
But that when people say, "I love them, but I can't live with them," that means they've made the emotional connection and they still have it. But they've lost the third component, which is practicality. And that can come from money. It can come from parenting decisions. It can come from how we deal with household chores. It can come from things like mental health. Things like depression and anxiety don't just take a toll on us. It takes a toll on the people around us. And those are treatable conditions. And so a practical reality of life is that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to be in the best health we can be. Doesn't mean you have to be an Olympian, but have some nutrition, drink some water, get a little bit of exercise, try to feel good. And if you have things that are treatable like depression or anxiety or some mental health conditions like that, get treatment. And anybody that says there's stigma there, with all due respect, that is wrong. That is just incorrect. There's nothing wrong with getting help. As I said earlier, we go to a doctor for physical health. Why would we not go and get help for our mental and emotional health? Those are practical realities. And another practical reality that we also mentioned earlier, some relationships have to end. That's a practical reality. You may still have that emotional connection, but on a practical reality, if they are an abusive person, you may still have emotional feelings for them. But if they're abusive, we're not intended to be abused. We were not put here on this world in this creation to be abused. That's not why we're here. And so if you want to have healthy relationships, you have to make room for them. Abusive, toxic relationships will consume your life. If you want to have healthy ones, a practical reality is you may have to end some toxic relationships, maybe with a parent, maybe with a sibling, maybe you have to divorce. Those are not easy decisions and they hurt. That's why grief is the first component of love. That will be our comeback story when this hurts. But that's a practical reality that if we want to build healthy relationships, we have to make room for them, sometimes by ending toxic or abusive relationships. And so the practicality is what really keeps us together. It's what builds that good life together to make good decisions, run our household well, work together well on the job, do the things every day, big and small, those big decisions, but also those very small decisions on how we speak to people, communication skills, which is also a learned skill set, all these practical realities to bring into relationships so that we aren't in a position where we say, I love that person, but I can't live with them. Practicality is how we live together.
Yeah. Okay. So we got grief, we got emotion, we got practicality. We got 3 out of 5. We can stand on 3 legs now, but I think it takes 5.
It really does take 5. All 5 are important, and this 4th one is especially critical and very often overlooked, and that is we have to love ourselves.
Oh, I was wondering when that was going to come in. Okay,
Yes.
here we go.
The 4th component I refer to as acceptance. And that can refer to accepting other people. We don't accept abuse, but we do accept other people and their flaws. But more importantly, we have to accept and love ourselves. Brene Brown's written a lot about this, done some great research in the area. There's other people that have as well, but she's the most noted and done brilliant work on that subject. And she says, you cannot love other people more than you love yourself. That's the top. That is the limit. And so many people misunderstand this because we have an opposite viewpoint. We think, well, if I can get people to love me, then it validates me, and then I can love myself.
Yeah.
There's logic to that, but it doesn't actually work that way in reality. We have to love ourselves first. That's our full capacity. We cannot love someone else more than we love ourselves, because love is not a commodity like money. Money, for instance, if we need more of it, we can get a second job. We can take out a loan from a bank. Maybe we can borrow money from a friend or family member. Theoretically, we could steal money, but I don't recommend that one. Don't do that.
Good thing. I'm glad to hear that.
But there's a lot of ways we could, good and bad. We can get money a lot of ways. Love is not like that. There's no way to acquire it. It has to be grown organically within us. And the capacity to which we love ourselves is the capacity that we can love other people. So if you want to love your spouse more, learn to love yourself more. If you want to love your family,
what exactly does that mean, though? I mean, because that's one of those things where there's a lot of palliative terms kind of floating around it. But what are we really saying here?
It really is about accepting who you are. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't want to improve ourselves. We can do that, but it's a basic acceptance that you are worthy as you are. And in that worthiness, in that value, we can change and we can improve along the way. That's part of our value, is we have the chance to improve areas of our life that where we're not satisfied, but that doesn't mean we beat ourselves up for it. It means that we look at that and we say, you know what, I could be even happier and even healthier if I made this change. That's a different attitude than beating ourselves up for doing something we don't like or that we want to get rid of. That I can be happier and healthier if I go this direction, but accepting that we have basic core value in who we are. We don't have to have anything else to be a person of value. The way I describe this, if we would imagine that we have in my hand, I have a diamond the size of a baseball size diamond, perfectly cut, perfectly clear. And we ask the question, how much is that worth? Obviously, it's priceless. So we take that perfectly cut, perfectly clear, baseball-sized diamond, and we take it out into a rural area. We find a cow pasture, and we roll it around in the muck and the mire and the cow manure. Bring it back in. How much is it worth now? It's still priceless.
It is.
Yeah. If you know what it is.
And if
now,
you're
if you just look at the what's that now?
And if you're willing to do something with the muck.
Exactly. If we just look at the outside, it looks pretty nasty. But if we know what it is, you don't care. You still want that priceless diamond and understand that, yeah, it's pretty nasty. But if you understand what it is, it doesn't matter. There's still value there. It's still priceless. And I argue that's who we are, that we are priceless. We are exquisite. We are of endless value just in who we are as human beings. And yes, through life experience, we've all been rolled around in the muck and the mire and the cow manure, and we look pretty rough. We've all had those experiences of life through our own mistakes, through things people have done to us, through just life itself. We could look pretty rough, but that doesn't change the value of who we are. That just means we need to get cleaned up. Yeah. And that's about self-improvement. That's what counseling is for. That's what religion and faith is about. That's what psychology is about. That's what love is about. Of of cleaning up all that mess of life and discovering our true value all along.
One of the things that jumps into my mind as we talk about this is the fact that we as humans, first of all, and you kind of alluded to this a moment ago, we do have a tendency, many of us, to treat ourselves in ways that we would never treat our best friend or even our worst friend.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, if we treated other people the way we treat ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends.
That's exactly right.
Which is really kind of an odd thing. It's amazing how we'll just beat the crap out of ourselves. But there's also an interesting flip side to it, which is we can treat ourselves better and end up loving ourselves more as a result. We have a tendency, I think, to think that we have to love first and then we get to change.
Right.
But it actually works the other way around.
If we love ourselves and we understand that value, it's easier to change because we understand that is all those changes we want to make aren't about our core value of our worth. It's about the life we want to live. It's about cleaning up that mess, fixing that mistake, or not setting better boundaries so that we don't have things done to us that mess up our lives. There's a lot of ways that this could go. And again, that's why counseling is important, to discuss how do we clean up some of this stuff. But it doesn't change the core value of who we are. But that's a discovery. That becomes a discovery of, as we clean up some of this stuff, as we begin to explore and accept ourselves. And as you said, stop beating ourselves up. You know, show a little bit of mercy, a little bit of compassion. That can go a long way. Just getting out of some of these habits, because, you know, if you make a mistake at work, it's very likely you're going to spend the whole day saying, I can't believe I did that. I cannot believe how dumb I am. That was so stupid. I cannot believe I am so useless. People will do this themselves all day, maybe longer, because of one maybe small mistake. But if you do something well, if you get it right, if you did a good job, do you spend the day saying, I am so good? Man, I'm good. Look at me. Probably not. It would help us if we did.
It'd be great if we did that. Yeah, that would be wonderful. But
and so to begin, there's a lot to this. And again, this is a good reason to be in counseling. But to begin, I would say just give positive affirmations, positive declarations equal time. I'm not saying stop beat yourself up instantly, because those are hard habits that are they've been around a long time. But give compliments equal time, because you've done something right.
Yeah.
And so just kind of, if you catch yourself saying, I can't believe how dumb I am for doing that. Okay, now let's find something you did right, because there's something there. And let's spend some time thinking about that and complimenting yourself. It will feel weird at first, because we're talking about, you know, neuro pathways in your brain are going to be much easier to form those negative thoughts. That's kind of the way we're wired up. But the positive thoughts will feel kind of weird. That's because your brain has to form new pathways to learn how to do that. It doesn't come as naturally. But as you give equal time, it'll feel more natural, and you'll actually start finding more ways to compliment yourself, because there's plenty there for everybody. So you don't have to radically change your personality or you know, make any drastic adaptations to your life. Just work at starting to give equal time. When you beat yourself up, give some equal time for the things you did well and build yourself up.
Yeah. There's a sort of a funny side effect that comes along with this, which is we talked earlier about how people can be very much in the mindset of I'm right. You know, that driving need to be right. And if you're somebody who has recognized that and you're trying to figure out how to let go of it, best way to learn to let go of that is to learn to let go of it with yourself.
Yeah. Just accept that give up that should and let go of the judgment about others and about ourselves.
If you can let go of it with yourself, it's a lot easier to let go of it.
A lot easier with somebody. One of the reasons we are so hard on other people is because we are so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
And that goes back to that, reinforcing that same point. You can't love other people more than you love yourself. And so if you need a reason other than your own value, to practice this, then understand once you get this, you understand about loving yourself and accepting yourself and showing compassion for yourself. You're going to be better at loving your spouse, your kids, your family, your friends. You're going to be better for them. And so if that's a motivator, then grab hold of that. But do this for yourself in order to be more loving to them.
My degree in school was political science and government. And one of the things I've noticed about politics is the politicians who hammer the hardest and the loudest. Oops, he's going to knock the microphone over. Who hammer the hardest and the loudest about X, whatever X is, are the ones who do it most often in their own lives. It's amazing how often that parallel happens.
It is.
In fact, when you hear somebody going off on something, you say, okay, so what have you been doing lately? My mind.
Yeah, there's that old phrase, you protest too much.
You protest too much. Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes we do reveal ourselves that way because we get stuck on these things and we think, well, if everybody else would stop, then I could stop.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
If we could just eliminate this from life.
If everybody else stop, then I'll finally be able to stop. I can't do that until everybody else does it. But when that happens, then I can finally stop.
and that is a real temptation in a lot of areas, that if everybody just got their act together, I'd be fine.
That's right.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's probably not going to happen. And so let's work on us. Let's get that counselor, that coach, that therapist. Let's work on finding our own value so that we can love others, and we'll value ourselves despite our flaws as we work on them, and we'll love other people despite their flaws as they work on them, because we're all doing the best we can. Sometimes that's a train wreck, but we're doing the best we can at the time.
Even if it's a train wreck, if it's the best you can, it's the best you can at that moment. It doesn't mean that that's forever. It's just for right now, that's where your best is.
It's the best we can do. And so compassion and acceptance is a vital part of love. If we're going to have loving relationships with other people, we have to have that relationship with ourselves. That is a fourth component of love, and it is one that is so overlooked because we try to jump into being validated by other people, and it just doesn't work. Sounds good, but it doesn't work. We have to love ourselves.
So we got grief, we've got emotion, we got practicality, we got self-love. How does all this tie together? Where's number 5?
The fifth component of love is passion, and this is a passion for life. This is just enjoying the life we have. And it becomes the wind in our sails. It becomes the fuel in our engine of getting up every day and knowing that we can look to enjoy the life we have with our family, with our co-workers. Is everything going to go right all the time? No. But some things can go right. And so look for it. Pay attention to it. Of course, when we see things going wrong, we're going to notice that. But let's make sure we see things going right. Again, that equal time. Let's look for things to celebrate and celebrate those little things. And really the key to this whole thing, the secret ingredient to having passion for life, is just having fun. Just remember to have fun as much as possible. Now, people will sometimes say, but life is serious. Yes, that's why practicality is the third component of love. That deals with the serious decisions of life. And yes, life can be tragic. That's why grief is the first component of love. So we can deal with the tragedies and come back from those and heal from those. But let's not forget that life can be fun, and that life needs to be fun and enjoyable, and that we need to enjoy the life we have with the people that we love. And so many people will have that emotional connection, and they may have come through grief in life, and hopefully they got the help they needed to do that well. And they've got emotional connection. They're making good decisions. They're being practical, and maybe they're even loving themselves and able to love other people. And then they think, what's missing? And I see this a lot. I don't want to stereotype too much, but I see this a lot with people that are like in their 30s and 40s because they've worked so hard through their early adult years because they said, well, yeah, get married, have kids, get that promotion, graduate from college, get that job, get that promotion, move up in the world, build that house, all these things. And they get to be 30s, 40s, and they've done a lot or maybe all of that. And they think, is this it? And what they've forgotten is all that that we say in society, oh, you should do this, is all meant to be enjoyed, to have fun. And so often we've treated it like a checklist that we just have to do all these things, and we have to accomplish all this, and we get into the grind of life. And of course, once you get into work and family and kids and household chores, there's a lot of stuff to do. And sometimes we just get into the grind and we wonder what's wrong. We're doing everything looks like correctly. We get along well. We love each other. We don't have any major problems, but something's just not right. Very often you've forgotten about the fifth component of love, which is passion. Enjoy your life. Have fun. That is not something that's frivolous. It's not something that is something to get to when you have time, because if you just wait till you have time, you won't. There's lots of studies that show how healthy things like laughter and fun is in your life, both mentally and even physically. It helps our health, but it helps our relationships. It bonds us together when we're having fun, when we're enjoying our life. And so if you can grieve the hurts of life and come back from that, keeping your heart, your mind, your spirit open to connections, you can build emotional connections with people. Even if that doesn't come natural to you, you learn how to do that. You make good decisions to live a practical life together, building a good life together. You accept yourself and others, knowing that you need to love yourself first in order to love others. And you have fun. You have a passion for life. You enjoy what you do and the people you do that with, both at home and at work and your friendships. You can build healthy relationships in every area of life, even if it hasn't gone well for you so far. You practice these 5 components, you can build a good, healthy, thriving life of relationships.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's true. I was particularly thinking about the connection between your 4th and 5th components.
Yeah.
Because in my own experience, the 4th one, the self-love component, the more that you build that up, the more you find the 5th one.
I think that's exactly true. I think that's a great observation. Yeah, because once we love ourselves, we accept ourselves, even in our flaws, we sort of give ourselves permission to have fun.
Yeah.
If we are down on ourselves, we're saying horrible things to ourselves, it's hard to flip that switch and go have fun. But when we accept that, yeah, I'm not perfect, but I'm working on it. And I'm working on it, not because I have to, but because it makes me happier and healthier to work on these things in my life. And it gives me the capacity to love people more when I do this. Then it's pretty easy at that point to find what you're passionate about, to find the fun of life and to enjoy those elements of life. So I love that observation. The 4th and the 5th one are very closely connected.
They really do connect. Yeah, it's very, very important. I'm curious to know about one thing, and this is something that for me is a core part of my personal growth pattern, my belief system. For me, it's something that you referred to, but it doesn't sound like it's core to your 5 components. So I just want to get your take on it. Mm-hmm. To me, one of the most important things in life is the building of connections.
Yeah,
and it's also one of the most neglected areas of life.
Yeah.
There are some people who easily build connections. They're usually the most successful people in whatever they're going to be successful in.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, relationship-wise, health-wise, doesn't matter. They're successful because they build their connections. If you don't successfully build connections, that's where you tend to have challenges in life. That's where the difficulties tend to come up. And so, to me, I mean, my own philosophy for myself is, if I want to grow myself, I need to work on your 4th component, which is the personal acceptance, personal appreciation, stop beating myself up, start appreciating, start loving myself, all that kind of thing, and building my connections with others. To me, that's the holy grail, that combination there. So I'm kind of curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, I would say that love is that element of connection. That love brings us into that connection. And again, I'm saying that love can be different. It's obviously different between family members and coworkers, but we can love our coworkers too. We can love and appreciate them in a different way, but it's still love. The subtitle to my book is Building a Life That Matters and Healthy Relationships That Last.
Mm-hmm.
And those are not two different things. Those are two sides of the same road. When we have those healthy relationships that last, then we're building the connections that build a life that matters. And if we have a life that matters, then it's because we've had those connections, those loving relationships, of however we're defining, however the love manifests in friendship or in coworker or in family or spouse or whatever it is. Those are two sides of the same road. They lead to the same place. Building that life that matters and healthy relationships that last come in those connections of love. And so I think when we know how to love, when we learn love, we learn to build those connections, and we have the confidence of understanding how to go out and build those connections in life.
This has been a great conversation, Mark. I'm really glad you came onto the show to talk about these things. A few things I want to touch on, though, before we wrap things up. First and foremost, somebody who wants to actually have a conversation, find out more about what you're offering, maybe run something by you and so forth, probably be a good idea if we give them an idea how to reach out to you, how to find you.
Absolutely. Go to my website. My website is markahicks.com. Make sure to get my middle initial in there. Hicks is Hicks, markahicks.com. And you can find everything there. You'll find information about my upcoming book being released by Morgan James Publishing in June of 25. Pre-sales will be available soon. And so I'd love for folks to look for pre-orders there. And I have links to my podcast, to my YouTube channel, all the information about my book. Of course, I have my free ebook, which is the 5 Components of Love, an overview, just as I've spoken of today. Before the book comes out in June, you can get my free ebook, the 5 Components of Love. It will outline many of the things I've talked about today about the 5 components of love and give you an overview. And of course, the book will have much more detail when it comes out. And there is a contact form there. I am available for speaking engagements, for workshops, for coaching. And so if you want to be in touch with me, I would love for folks to send me a message on the contact form, or if you just want to send me a message and say that you saw me on the show today, I would love to hear from you.
That's a beautiful thing. So Learning Love is coming out. When is it coming out exactly?
It'll be available in wherever books are sold in June of 25. Pre-orders will be available soon, and I'll have the exact date on my website as soon as that information comes available. And so pre-orders will be available soon. June 25, it'll be available in bookstores and online, wherever books are sold.
Sounds great. And we'll make sure we'll have a link to your website in the show notes so they can find their way there easily. Because we like
Wonderful.
Easy is one of our favorite things. We try to put the easy button in.
Love easy.
One other thing that I like to do, and I've been doing this for a few years now, I noticed something, because in your case, not only do you have your practice, but you also are an author. And so we live in the 21st century where self-promotion is about reaching out, talking to people through the various modalities that are available to us through the internet, through social media, all that kind of thing. And so a thing has developed over the last 20, 25 years that didn't really exist before, which was creating content, putting out content, being on podcasts, writing blog posts and writing books and writing articles and social media posts and all this other kind of stuff. And it fits very nicely, it feeds very nicely to why so many people become who they are, what it is that they're doing in their lives, is why they end up being on the show here, because they like you went through your toxic first marriage and you learned stuff from it, and you wanted to share it with the world. Like, wow, this is great stuff. And so you go out there and you're sharing with the world, you're telling people so forth. And the thing that I noticed is there are so many of us who are doing that and reaching out and helping people that we never find out what happened. I mean, sometimes we do find out, which is great. But very often we're helping people in ways that we don't even know about, and we don't get credit for it, and it just kind of like gets ignored. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to practice appreciation, especially self-appreciation, wouldn't it be a good thing to be appreciating that? So, Mark, on behalf of people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you don't even know about because you've been putting all this stuff out there, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Well, that is a beautiful thought. I love that. Thank you. I love that idea.
Yeah, I'm still kind of blown away that we ignore that, because it's so important, especially in the 21st century where we're so connected. My goodness.
Yeah, it is. You know, I had an experience just a few days ago. I was on a meeting. It was a Zoom meeting. It had a lot of people, and I saw a guy on that meeting. I had never met him, but long story short, there was a lot of things that he does in his life that have influenced me.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I just sent him a direct message while we were in the meeting. I said, "Hey, quick introduction. Here's some things I have done and that you influenced along the way. And so just wanted to say thanks." He sent me back a message of such gratitude, saying, "There are so many days I have no idea if I'm even making a difference. Thank you for letting me know that I've made a difference in your life." And so, and he was just so grateful I'd sent that message. And this is a guy who's done a lot of stuff. You know, he's well known. He's done a lot of things, but he was so grateful that I sent that message. You're absolutely right. We all are out there trying to help, trying to make the world a little better place. Sometimes we get to see that we are. Most of the time, we probably don't. So thank you so much.
We need the reminder because we are making a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, all these things that we do have ripple effects, and the ripples go on and on and on.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Yeah. We need to hold on to that.
You didn't get a chance to meet my co-host. Jody Lynn had another engagement going on today, so she couldn't make it to today's show. But what I usually like to do with my co-hosts, because they have such fabulous perspectives, is I ask them to kind of tie together the conversation. You know, what's your bow that you tie everything together with today? And obviously I can't do that because Jody Lynn's not here today. So I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to ask you to do it. That way, you know, between the two of us, we'll get like a good bow going on here.
Absolutely.
So for me, the big takeaway today is that love is an activity. In other words, if you take action on your 5 components, if you actually take it upon yourself to turn love into an activity and not just make it some sort of a static thing that kind of exists there, then you can have it in infinite numbers of ways in your life. So make it an activity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The way I phrase that is that love is a learned skill set. That this is something we build. It's not luck. It's not mystery. We don't have to just trip and fall into it. It is something that we do. And that's good news for everyone, because we all probably have 1 or 2 or 3 of these components in place, but might struggle with 1 or 2 that we could work on. But if we've come from a dysfunctional family, if we've come through a toxic or abusive relationship, this is especially good news that you can start where you are and make it that activity of life to build the relationships that you want and you need and that you deserve.
I love it. Mark, thanks so much for joining me today. This has been fun.
My pleasure. It has been fun.
I know our listeners have gotten a lot of value of it. And I wish you all the best with the book coming out. And keep doing what you're doing, guy.
Thank you so much. I certainly will.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.